Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to everyone for the 21st session of Friday for Water. For those of you who are attending this session for the first time, there is an introduction to this initiative. The Friday for Waters initiative of the W for W is an expansion and continuation of the signature communication series, Wednesday for Water. The main idea is to make Fridays fun-filled and also fruitful with activities for the future generation. There are 4 activities initiated as a series of Friday Waters: Water Talkies, Water Reading Club, Water Thesis Club, and Water Arts. The idea is to bring together knowledge about water available in various forms at one place and to highlight the issues, problems, and solutions. We also hope to increase the outreach of people who have been working in this area. Each of this session takes place on every Friday. The first Friday of every month, we have Water Talkies. Second Friday, like today, we have book reading sessions. Third Friday is for Thesis Club, and fourth one is for Water Art sessions. These Friday sessions are aspired to be fun-filled and fruitful to learn about water matters. Keep following us at www.w4w.in for regular updates. Today we have Sandhya Rao with us, who is a journalist, book editor, and writer. She has published several books for children and rendered Astrid Lindgren's Pippi Longstocking in Hindi. In 2006, she was invited to the Frankfurt Book Fair. My friend, The Sea, received a prize at the Berlin Literary Festival in 2005. She has shared books with children in towns and cities inside and outside India and participated in several book fairs. She writes a column on books called Words World, on books for Rotary News, and teaches at the Crescent School of Business at Chennai. Some of her books are Eki Doki, Storm in the Garden, Grandma's Eyes, My Friend the Sea, Picture Gandhi, My Gandhi Scrapbook, Okasa Otusama, Think, Eat, Save, and Seed Soil Sun. She lives in Chennai, I think by the beach. Sandhya Rao has spent considerable time on the beach near her home, looking at the sea with fascination. It made her think about human relations with nature and questions like why a man would want to prevail over nature, as it has been questioning power, constancy, and beauty. Water stories from around the world. The book today is a collection of stories on water from mythology and folklore. The focus remains on the protection, conservation, and value of water. 9 well-known authors have written these stories, drawing upon oral traditions of Ivory Coast, China, India, Greece, Australia, North America, Spain, Nigeria, and Botswana. The stories are more than the places they come from, to reflect upon an intrinsic connection. The pictures of the book also represent various cultures and are inspired by them. The stories also weave together facts and timelines from the earliest times. It makes a plea to not only children but all age groups, including me, creatively to treat water and all living things with respect. The book is published by Tulika Publishers, and I thank Radhika Menon of Tulika Publishers for these introductions with Sandhya Rao, and request all of you to look at the very enlightening work of this publication house. Sandhya has penned 2 stories in this book: Queen of the World, A Tale from Spain, and Tribute of a King from Greece. These stories make us reflect on the reasons for our quest to test our strength against nature. I also take this opportunity to introduce our young discussant, Joya Pais. Joya, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joya.
This session is envisaged as an interactive session, and Sandhya mentions that she would be very happy to receive comments and questions anytime in the session. Please raise your hand or write in the chat box anytime during the session. Now, a bit about Joya. Joya grew up in Delhi and now is a student at the Rishi Valley School in Madanapalle, Andhra Pradesh. She's 14 years old and currently in the 8th grade. Besides books and readings, she likes to collect rocks and research on them. Her rock collection has some interesting and rare rocks and stones. Her study and research on rocks, though still basic, is enough to help her identify some minerals and elements present in the rocks. She likes to do long distance cycling in nature with her father, that is Jason, who is here with us. She believes with long distance cycling, a whole new type of world opens up to her. She is happy that she is able to contribute to the change of Earth's environmental health. And now I would hand over to Joya to take this further with Sandhya ji. Thank you, Joya, and welcome, Sandhya ji.
Thank you, Alka. I should begin by thanking the team at W4W for organizing today's event and inviting me to be a discussant. As a result of this invitation, I have read this book multiple times. And as with most good books, every time I reread this book, I learn something new. I have a set of questions that I've prepared for today's discussion, and now I would like to pose them to our guest and the author of this book, Sandhya Rao. So as I was preparing for this discussion, I realized that all good children's story writers are in fact adults. So my question to you, Sandhya, is how does it work? How are you able to write from a child's perspective? How difficult is it? Sorry, you're muted.
Sandhya, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. I always forget to do this. Okay, thank you, Joya. And thank you, Team Water, for arranging this. The thing is, once this session was, once I received the invitation for this session, I said, and as it got closer to this day, this Friday, I said, oh my God, Joya says she has read this book so many times. I better read it again once now, because it's a long time since I put it together. So I've been doing my homework as well. Your question about adults writing for children, how difficult is it? It is, how easy it is. I don't know about difficulty levels, but one thing I do know is that although I am an adult and many of us have so much gray on our heads, most of us at least would remember our childhood one way or the other. And while I will not say that it's not necessary that all those memories are pleasant memories, sometimes they may not be all that pleasant. It's a kind of a mixed bag that you come with. And some of us carry memories, good, bad, exciting, adventurous, all of that. Some of us carry those memories with us. For some, it becomes a kind of an occasion to kind of be nostalgic about those good old days when we were young. But I think when it comes to people who are interested in writing, who are interested in sharing, whatever the medium, and it is not limited only to writing, it could be a painting, it could be a photograph, it could be a film, it could be a discussion, anything creative. You sort of somewhere, something of you and your experience informs whatever you present. You may not even be conscious of it. Very often, you're not even aware of it. Sometimes people are aware of it and they share that, or some memory, some experience triggers whatever they're doing. And I would say the same thing happens when we write. Something somewhere triggers some small, spark of inspiration, and then you go on to do whatever it is that you're doing. About it being easy or difficult, I can't say. Sometimes, something gets into your head and it just kind of, what shall I say? A story can even write itself in one sense. But you have to be very, very lucky to find yourself in that position. Most of the time, you write it, and then you wake up the following morning and you say, oh my God, this is rubbish. What I've written is rubbish. And you delete it. In the old days, when we didn't have computers, we would tear the pages and throw them away. Or you might, you might constantly question what you have written, and you're constantly trying to hold it up against what you think of as truth. And I separate this idea of truth from reality, because the truth depends upon how you see things, depends upon your experiences, and and how you communicate them. So you find you have to constantly judge or measure not judge, that's the wrong word, but measure yourself against this big truth that stares you in the face, and then you write it. So I would think for the most part, it is a little bit difficult rather than a little bit easy.
So that's kind of true. Like, I sometimes write stories and the next day I'm just like, oh, this is rubbish. So yeah, I feel that too. I have my favorite story from this book, which I'll tell later and why. But first, we'd like to hear from you. Which is your favorite story from this book, Sandhya?
It's like asking someone who their favorite child is. It's very hard. It's very, very hard to decide. But if, since you're asking, and this is another thing that I thought about when I was rereading the book, I said, okay, she wants to know which my favorite story is. So let me look at it again, and it's not so much for the way the story is written. My answer is based more on what idea the story is trying to express. So taken like that, I would choose, where did that story go? House of Sun and Moon. Because it really talks about the universe. It talks about the sun and the moon and holding all of life, animate as well as inanimate, in its hands. And then, feeling responsible, feeling proud and all of that. And then there are this swirling waters of this large family that she carries. And the fact that water knows her nature, knows who she is and what she can do. She looks at herself in the mirror, not in the story, but in a general sense, in a metaphorical sense, and recognizes herself for who and what she is. But sun and moon are so kind of wrapped up in their world, that they feel they can conquer anything and anybody. And then what happens when water actually visits their home, knocks on the door, and sun and moon open the door, and then, water enters. And right now, in fact, we're in the middle of a cyclone here in Chennai. It's not been raining that hard, but it occasionally rains a little bit relentlessly, and then it stops. And then every time this happens, you realize the power that water has, and how self-aware water must be, in terms of keeping our earth and its people safe and alive and breathing. So yes, I think, like I said, because of the idea is contained in House of Sun and Moon. It's a retelling of a Nigerian folktale. I think I like that story the best, but I also like the other stories.
That was one of the stories I liked too. It like knocks on the door and water, and then the moon they're all occupied in their own universe.
Right. You can actually, it's so vivid. It's also very vivid. The pictures actually float before your eyes, you can actually see it like a movie in your head.
Yeah. I like to share my favorite story, which is A Well is Born from India. I like it because it's poetic and I like poetic writings. I write a lot of poems. So I like it also because it contains facts that are knowledgeable. Like you need water for a termite hill to stay strong. If there's no water, the termite hill would collapse. So if you see a dry land and you see a termite hill, then you'll know that the land isn't really dry. It actually contains some water nearby. So yeah, I also liked your story, Queen of the World, especially the way it ended. So taking this book as an example, which story is hardest for an author to write?
Mm, yeah, I'll just to sort of give you a context. When we invited people to contribute to this collection, because we wanted stories related to water, not, I mean, there was no kind of stricture as to water being a solution, why we should save water, or why water is precious. The theme was water, and they could pick any story that had anything to do with water. Some of the writers made their own selections, but we also did some research at our end, at the publisher's end, and found a few folk tales from different parts of the world and shared them with the guest writers, and each of them chose one thing or the other. I think one of the stories that may have been difficult to write is, Koluskap and the Water Monster. It's a kind of it's hard to tell what kind of story it is, if and generally these kind of monster stories are a little bit difficult. If they're straightforward, they become a little boring. If they're complex, then they get really complex. And I think Koluskap and the Water Monster was such a story, where it takes a monster to defeat a dragon in the water in order to save the water for the people. So it's a bit hard. But on the other hand, a story like Tiddalik the Frog, if you remember it, it's a classic trope, a greedy frog that drinks up all the water and becomes fatter and fatter and fatter and won't share it. And different people try different things to make it, give up the water that it has swallowed. And then you have to read the book to find out how the story ends. But that's a slightly simpler story. It's easy to follow. Like there's a story about many of you might have heard your grandmothers or grandfathers tell you the story about a little sparrow who was friends with an old lady, and she was making kheer one day, and the sparrow was so excited about that kheer, the smell, and it looked so tasty. I wanted to taste it immediately. But the old lady said, just hang on a second. It's very hot. Just wait for it to cool. By the time she said, wait for it to cool, the sparrow had stuck its beak into the hot kheer and burnt its insides, and got very angry with the old lady and ran to the pond and drank up all the water there and became fatter and fatter. It had to stuff all the little orifices in its body, so that the water wouldn't burst out, that kind of thing, similar kind of Tiddalik type of story that I remember my grandmother telling me. Yeah, so these two stories are kind of, I think, stand on opposite ends of the scale in terms of complexity and simplicity.
So, Zoya, I would like to add a bit here.
Yeah.
In this storybook, actually, the way you have picked up the stories, they are not about really giving some morals, it's about giving ideas. And that is what makes this stories really, very interesting for kids, because kids are also in a way tired of, adults telling them do this, don't do this, etc. But this book doesn't do this. it would give you an idea and leave it there. So which is just fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah, very, very nice. Yeah. Zoya, please.
Uh, I didn't.
Anyone else also would like to comment can go on, please. Yeah.
Well, that's a nice thing. I didn't know about the the crow story, so I heard a new story today.
Mhm.
Um, I found your story, Tribute for a King, a little hard to understand. So, is it about justice and democracy? Can you please explain to us what the story tries to say? And an extension to this question is, are morals and ethics doing things correctly? Worrying about the right things? For example, the environment, important themes for you while you write for children?
Okay, many questions in that question. Okay. Uh, well, anything, I like history. Okay. I love history. And as I grow older, I've been reading more and more. And I realized that what I studied in school, was a sham, actually. The history that we were taught in school was sham and was a sham and was shameful, because we didn't get any sense of what the essence of history is. And in a sense, this story is reflects that love for history. So uh, basically, it is about, yes, like you said, it is about leadership, it is about democracy, it is about who owns what, and do we own anything at all? What do we have power over? Do we have power at all? It all depends upon how you look at it. So simply said, simply stated or explained, you have Alexander on his conquering spree. He's conquered this, he's conquered that, he's conquered everything. Now he wants to go below waters and conquer Poseidon's water kingdom as well. And he doesn't realize, and he's very well read, and he's been taught by great philosophers. So he thinks he has it all and he has the right to everything that exists. And it takes a small little task given to him by Poseidon, who tells him, okay, I'll give you a box and fill it with whatever you want and bring it back to me, and I'll hand over my kingdom, water kingdom, to you. And he takes that box to land, because he's tired of being underwater all this while, fills it with sand, fills it with pebbles, makes a kind of a stone kind of solid brick thing, tries to stuff the solid brick thing into the box, but nothing holds, everything disappears. So when he takes the box back, admitting defeat to Poseidon, Poseidon says, well, the fact is, I don't own anything either. I don't own this kingdom either, because he puts the box into the water and it fills with water. But slowly, even as they're looking at it, the six sides of the box disappear and everything merges. All he sees is water and the life that lives, aquatic life in the water. So what it means simply is this, that you cannot hold on to nature and say it belongs to you. It actually, one of the questions that, if you take this discussion further, one of the questions at that time that came to my mind was, we live in houses, we live in apartments, and we buy pieces of land and we say, this belongs to me, that belongs to me. But if you go back generations and you go back to the very beginning of time, who did all this belong to? And who gave you the authority or the permission to say, this belongs to me, my family, my children will have it? So it's just a simple way of saying you cannot draw lines in the water. Water belongs to everybody. Nobody can claim it to be theirs. That's all. It's actually a very, very simple message in this story. But it is kind of told in a half humorous fashion. uh, focusing on the arrogance in one sense, you can say, of Alexander, but you can't blame him because he's he died by the time he was 32. So by the age 32, he had conquered so much, had seen so much, he had exhibited so much bravery. So you can't blame him for being the way he was, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a little interaction to show that, well, you can be whoever you are. You can be the prime minister of this country. But everybody is free. You cannot hold on. You cannot claim to own anybody or anything. In fact, you owe rather than own. That's the difference. Does that make the story seem a little clearer?
Yeah, it makes it quite clear now.
And I've
compared to
forgotten
the
all the
last
other
one.
questions that you asked. I'm sorry.
So
Thank you, Sandhya ji. 1 second, Joya. There is a
yeah,
hand which is raised, Mr. Chandra.
No, I just joined late. Sorry for that. It was so interesting. We became children when Sandhya Rao started explaining the story with so much of animation and nice voice modulation, stuff like that. Two stories because she is a heritage and a history enthusiast. Two stories we can compare together. In how Ganga was captured by Shiva and Gangadhara story is known, but not many know Madurai Meenakshi temple story, where the Vaigai name, Vai means keep your hand on the land. Vai Kai. That was the real reason. When the Meenakshi marriage happened, Shiva was ridiculed for not having any gust because he is a guy from the forest and from the Himalayas with all that ashes on his body and all that, not well clad, not a very rich person. But Meenakshi is a queen there. She is the heiress of the king and she is ruling Madurai. And she has captured all over the countries and gone up to Himalaya. The story goes like this. She had 3 breasts, very rare thing. And the gods will say, when you go and see the right match for her, the third breast in between will get disappeared. So, and then when she sees Shiva, she understands that she is an avatar and she is Parvati herself, and she will come back and agree to marry him first time to his king because the king is so annoyed. She is like a masculine, like a superwoman, going and doing war and other things, conquering many people. Who will give this girl for marriage? Who will become the right groom? Shiva. He was so worried. So what happened finally? Shiva and Parvati saw each other, and Madurai Meenakshi Sundareswarar temple was, the marriage was to happen, but no gust in the groom's side. So when then he showed, okay, I have this small Gundodara, the small tiny igloo, a small guy who is like 1 or 2 feet tall and a very fat kid-like guy. He said, this one fellow, you just feed him. If he's good enough, it's okay. He finishes off all the food, all the granary, the vegetables, whatever is available, he is a Bhutagana. He keeps on eating everything, and then the king realizes that he is supreme God, that is Shiva himself. And the people were so aghast that even they borrowed, they say, money from Kubera and other thing to fulfill the appetite of this fellow. And this fellow keeps on eating. Then comes the thirst. He is so thirsty and he runs and asks for water, no water. Then Shiva comes finally to the finish of the story and to realize people that he is an avatar himself. He says, don't worry, this dwarf, I can take care of this fellow, he is my fellow. I'll give him water. He just put his hand on the ground and pulls it out, and Vaigai water springs up as a spring, and Gundodhara satiates his thirst. So that is the story. So if you see in mythology also, and again, that Karikal Cholan built the dam in Trichy. The dam is almost 1200 years old. Water irrigation is known in Chola kingdom, how they were able to build huge reservoirs. Any barren land tract like near Gangaikonda Solapuram, it is actually 210 acres. In Uttaramerur, it is almost some 180 acres of land, which was deliberately made to do rainwater harvesting, restoration of water. And that tank was built into small bunds. It was going into rivulets, into smaller village, and even brick-made tunnels. Still, we get a lot of pipes which were burnt and made up of brick kiln. So those type of pipes are available, which are almost 1,000 years ago. So these are all interesting stories to add to Sandhya Rao. Maybe she knows. And I'm so excited that the water could be told in such an exciting way, because people normally bore with water. Water is more of war. And the sad things only. That is not good. It is not good. This contamination, that kind of. We became so sick, and we wonder whether we should sip a glass of water before us. But listening it through stories is something really exciting. I also learned a lot, and thanks for your time and stories, madam. Thanks, nice.
Thank you, Chandrasekharanji. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, just to add a note to what Mr. Chandrasekhar said, a postscript to that, like in the old days, many of the temples, large temples in South India, every temple has a tank, right? And there will be roads all around it, and those roads would slope sideways towards the tank, and there will be little holes on the walls of the tank, so that every time it rained, the water would go towards the tank and into the tank, and that was one of the ways of saving water.
Saving water, yeah.
But now, because we don't think about sensible things like that, we raise the roads higher and higher and higher, and block all those holes. That's why so many temple tanks are dry. This is just, by the way, to add to what he said. Yes, Joya.
That's nice. That's really, really nice to hear one more story. I didn't think I'll hear so many stories today. So the question that you missed, Sandhya, was, are morals and ethics doing things correctly, worrying about the right things, for example, the environment? Are these important themes for you while writing for children?
If you are asking if I write stories in order to impart some morals or something, that the answer would be no, because who am I to do that anyway, firstly? And each one has their own system, belief systems and things like that. But yes, in the larger context, I think, and this relates not only to children's books, but to any kind of writing we do, whether it's a fiction, non-fiction, whether it's a newspaper article or whatever it is. The effort, I think, would be, again, coming back to the point I made earlier, the effort would be the seeking of truth. I know it sounds very philosophical, but that effort informs, even, for instance, if I write a nonsensical story, or just a funny story, or just a light-hearted story, not a theme-based story, because it's not like you just have an idea and you just put it together. You might just have an idea and note it down, but when you try to develop it, make a story out of it, and you want to communicate, there is something beyond that story that you wish to communicate, right? And that you don't spell that out. Any good piece of writing, any piece of writing that's worth its salt, conveys something more, goes beyond the words in the text. Whether, like I said, whether it's a newspaper article, whether it's a film script, whether it is a little picture book text for 4-year-olds, or whether it's an adult, it's a work of fiction for an adult, or non-fiction, whatever. So yes, while I do not believe in writing moral stories, but there is a life that you lead that follows certain principles that seem ethical to you, right? And that gets reflected in what you write. And that's reflected is the wrong word. That communicates itself through your writing. At least that's the effort. And wrong notes, if you sharpen your ears, writing is just like music, just like painting. When you're listening to music and you hear what we call apaswar, no, the wrong note, you immediately sort of a person whose ear is well tuned, you react to that, right? Similarly, you can hear the wrong notes in writing as well. You just have to learn to listen, not just read with your eyes, but also read with your ears. And then you reflect upon what you're reading.
That's really nice. That's true, sometimes people can't really force morals and stories. It sometimes automatically comes. Sometimes you just don't intend to put it, and it just comes. So, and yeah, thank you for your answer. The next question, actually, I've answered it before, but I would like to change the question here and there, and I'd like to ask you, which is, storytelling has been an old tradition throughout the world. And it's nice and lovely to see a book that has used this method to bring such stories told to children throughout the world into this one book. So, how did you and your co editor go about selecting such good stories for this book? And were they narrated to you by someone? I'm particularly interested to learn how do you draw upon these oral traditions?
Well, see, as a child, I mean, I'm a very good listener. I love listening to stories. I mean, I loved listening to stories when I was a child. I had a grandmother who told the most marvelous stories in the most dramatic way. She would drop everything she was doing if I asked her to tell me a story. And so that has, and I continue to be a very good listener to stories. Okay. I love stories. So in fact, I think I'm a much better listener than a writer or anything else. But when these stories called for, we didn't want to showcase the usual well-known stories. And we were looking for stories connected with water from around the world. I mean, obviously, you can't do a book with stories from 50 countries, because then you won't be able to carry that book around with you. So we had to choose about 10 or 12, whatever. So it involved doing a lot of research, actually checking out from collections, and online as well. And also, it also meant looking, sometimes stories are sometimes connected. In fact, they are always connected to the culture from which the stories emerge. And if you are not familiar with that culture, or if that culture is not so easily accessible, or if that culture needs a lot of explanation, then the story can lose its momentum. So it meant doing a lot of research over a period of time, and pulling out. At least, we pulled out about 20 stories. Now I can't remember, because this book was done ages back. So I can't remember what the other stories were, but did a lot of research and selected from among possible. Sometimes, the information about the story or the storyline would be given in just 5 or 6 lines. So it only gave an idea, or it mentioned some names, or this is the belief in, X country or whatever. But if it sounded interesting, or if it seemed as though there were possibilities to develop that into an interesting story, we pulled that out. So we were able to share, like I said, some of the authors, like Zai Whitaker's story about Selakana and the river goddess, a Botswana story. She has lived in Botswana, so she was familiar with the story, Zai. So that came from her. She selected it herself. But other stories we pulled out, did research, pulled out, and shared. And whoever felt comfortable with whichever, and first come, first serve. So if X chose A story, then Y could not choose A, had to take B, C, or D, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's how we did it.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandhya. I think Mansi had raised her hand.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandhya ji. I'm just flowing with you and Joya, and it is really wonderful to listen to both of you. Especially, I could say that Joya is so well prepared to ask you lovely questions, and your animation is really, really strong and informative. My question is a little bit on the adult side of it, and trying to explore possibility. Can we change the adults' heads particularly, because by heart so many of us are like children, like even Chandrasekharan was saying that we feel like child today, yeah, something like that. So because we are seeing so much of water distress, and the very purpose of doing this kind of water conversations is to really make people listen to various ways water have been brought forward. Do you think these kind of storytellings, and particularly articulated stories which have these utopian ideas, and they walk us through like novels, are enough written on water where people can be a little bit more empathizing towards the way today we deal with water? Because rightly mentioned by Chandrasekhar again, that we are really talking about water most of the time in technical sense, and more concerned rather than living it. So I just put two quotes in the chat box from Lao Tzu and Rumi about be like water, or just like if you are a drop in the ocean, you are also ocean in that drop, so by yourself. So I'm just wondering, can we change the heads of the people who are really in adults and should take some right decisions in the cities and society to make sure that water is not so much in distress? Whether we agree or not, we are in water crisis at this point, and I can realize it from Chennai at least. Where do you see the power of this kind of tool, I will say artwork or tool, which can really make people more softer towards dealing with water as a subject?
Yeah, in fact, you raise a very, very interesting point. The thing is, even these stories that we have drawn from different countries and different cultures, they tell you that water has been the subject of storytelling and sharing for eons.
Ever since.
So people have recognized the importance of water. I mean, it's not a new thing. No, it's not a new worry, or it's not a new concern. It has been, I mean, whether they were celebrating it at one time, or whether they were expressing concern, or in some stories, they talk about there being drought, no water, and so they are seeking water. So over the centuries, water as a subject has been a matter of interest and concern. So I think sharing stories like these are not this may be put together as a book for young people, but these stories are as relevant for adults as they are for young people. And the thing is, I feel what this history of water over the ages shows us through the storytelling is that people lived close to nature. They were close to water. They were close to trees and forests and fresh air and fruits and vegetables and, animals and all of that. The way we live today, things have changed. Everything has changed. I mean, and it is bound to change. We have to accept that as more and more human beings and creatures walk the earth, the carrying capacity of the earth gets more and more, comes under greater and greater pressure, there will be changes. So how do we adapt to those changes? And how do we live keeping in mind the power that nature has over us? I mean, we can build the biggest dams, we can build the maximum number of flyovers and build houses on all areas that were once water bodies. We can do what we want. Come one flood, and that kind of destroys us. We've seen that happen over and over again. So I think sharing stories in a sense brings you closer to who you are, to your through in ways that are culturally relevant to you. So now we also have to think in terms of an urban culture. So in that context, how do you kind of relate to water? In a rural context where you have huge paddy fields. So in that context, your relationship to water may be different. We are talking about recycling water. In Singapore, you recycles so much of its water and they actually make it potable at the end of it. So that is their relationship. So I think it's important to, being creative, using the imagination is not just for painters and artists. It is for daily life, to how you live your life every day calls for the use of creative use of your imagination. Why do we have an imagination? In order that it be used. In order that it be used in a way that helps us in our daily lives. I think these are things. Water cannot be talking about water cannot be compartmentalized.
Yes.
It impacts our every moment, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And many of us wake up several times in the middle of the night as well. So, whether for whatever reason. So, yeah, I think we have to keep sharing. This is just one collection of stories, but I think it's important to share them and discover, and in the process, create more stories as well and share. And those stories can come through experiences, people sharing experiences. Experiences become stories, and those stories get, you kind of make allegorical stories out of experiences as well. So that's how I don't know. I have no answers to the questions you're asking, but these are some thoughts that split from your questions.
Thank you so much. At least, Alka, I think I and you can learn that we have to be more creative in putting our projects and works of water when we are talking in the policy domain. So thank you so much, Sandhya, and over to you, Alka.
Yeah, I'm over to Joya. Joya has few more questions.
Okay.
Do we have time for that, Alka?
Yes, we have. Go ahead.
So there are two parts to this question for Sandhya. The first one is about the stories that you have written, and the second one is about the stories that you have edited. So of all the books and stories that you have written and edited, which ones do you like the most?
Can't answer.
And why?
Can't answer that. They're all precious to me. Not just my stories, other people's stories, and definitely stories that I've edited are very precious to me. So I can't choose. I cannot choose. It's impossible. But if you ask me generally, no, I can't answer. I was trying to think of something. I can't answer that question. I can't give you an answer, rather, because I don't have one. Each is precious in its own way.
Each story has something unique in it.
I don't know if it has anything unique, but it is precious.
Yeah, it's understandable. Just like children, as you had said before.
Yeah.
You can't pick your favorite child.
Cannot. Impossible.
So I am in a residential school, right? And over here we interact with outsiders through, and parents, friends, and outsiders through letters. So the reason it will be a particular interest to me to learn about how children communicate and write to you. So about your stories, so it'll be an interest. I would like to know about how they do it.
Well, I have to be honest and say not many children write to me. But when I meet them, sometimes somebody will come and say whatever, very small children can't imagine. I mean, they would have read stories, or their parents would have read out stories to them. They're not able to connect the fact that these things are written by somebody. They think those stories just exist, those books just exist. So even to understand that acha, somebody has written this story and this is that. So there'll be some kids who are not impressed at all. Mother will say, oh, Sunu, she wrote this, and that child will just look at you and say, okay, okay, that's all right. Then there'll be others who read something, excuse me, and they'll say, I love this book, I love this character really. Then the odd one will write to you and say, I really like this. But there are many who will tell you, it was very boring. So the one question a writer should never ask is, did you like my book? No, never ask that question. Never. Even if it is about water, no, don't ask that question. Because they will definitely, you can ask, what about water? Do you like water? And, or most of them will say yes. And if they say no, if you kind of ask them like, what about those juices you have and those soft drinks you have and all that, then, they'll say, oh yeah, that's true. Yes. And all that. But if you ask, do you like the story? Be ready to get receive an honest answer. That's all I'll say.
It exists. So this is my last question for today's discussion. It is, what are your future projects on storytelling?
Right now, actually, with the a friend who's an academic who studied children's literature and who's been a teacher and all that, we are putting together critical writings on children's literature. That's currently the project. So again, that involves about between 15 and 20 contributors. So currently we're chasing after them to, give us the first draft and the second draft. And then we have to look at it and give critical feedback. And sometimes the critical feedback has to be given in a very gentle way, because people can get upset, Though personally, I'm all right. You feel bad for a little while and then you get down to the job and you start repairing what you have done. But it involves a lot of work. So currently, that's what I'm working on. What else am I doing? I'm trying to think. Whenever I get in the mood, I write something. If I feel like it, I send it for publication. Otherwise, I'm just happy writing something. But I really enjoy writing my column for Rotary News, which I do every month. It's about books. So I read a lot, which means it gives me a valid excuse to not do anything else but read. Imagine, that's the ideal world as far as I'm concerned. I just can read. So that's what I'm up to. And you know how time flies, By the time you've done one set, you have to deliver the next article. Start reading another book. So that's how it works. And it's not necessarily about books per se, just ideas connected with books.
And Anita, do you want to say something? Anita? Okay. Sandhya, I have a question. You mentioned about truth is, a very personal thing in a way, that you're saying you are having a truth and it will be different from reality which is out there. So storytelling is a mean to talk about your truth to others. That's how I learned from you. How do you make your own truth everybody, this is an attempt to make your truth everybody else's truth, or at least communicate it with others so that they accept it. So is the effort in those directions? Then, how do you manage to basically getting kind of consensus,
Yeah, so you see, it's the way I look at it, it's about reflecting on and discovering my truth.
Yes.
But I have no hold over whether somebody else will accept it or not.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Yes.
but I have to, so it's a question of my integrity.
Yes.
And so that is what compels my writing, but I have no control. The other person may or may not accept it. So that's not my agenda at all.
Okay.
But having said that,
Yes.
if the writing, I mean, if the truth of the writing,
Yeah.
it's a very abstract idea.
Yes.
But if the piece of writing has integrity, if it holds together, then you know, it will communicate itself to the person who receives it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, yes. Very deep. Yes. True. Yeah. Thank you so much, Joya. I'm sorry, I'm taking your time. Anyone else? Any other questions from anyone?
I have a question for Sandhya, if I may.
Yes, Jason.
Yeah. So it's about the new forms of communication, social media, the attention span, and so on. People are not reading books anymore. We are reading stuff online. Maybe we are reading shorter pieces. How does it change life of a writer like you? Meaning, did you have to, over the last 10, 15 years, do things very differently to cater to the new, meaning you would internally you would be the same person, but to communicate to the outside world, the demands are different now. Was it a struggle? Is it different, or life goes on as it was before?
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm a very old-fashioned person, and I can't relate in the sense I have a Facebook account because somebody long back said you must have one, but I do nothing there. I don't get on Instagram. At most, I exchange messages on WhatsApp, but I hardly ever read the forwards that are sent to me. I simply don't have the bandwidth to do that because I have so much other reading to do, so many other things to do that. So, no, it has not. Speaking for myself, what I write, what I feel I would like to communicate. And it has nothing to do with I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do not cater to the needs of whatever, unless it's somebody commissions. For instance, the Terry commissioned me to do a book on not wasting food, that kind of thing. So it's a subject, it's based on the topic, on the subject, but not based on the attention span. I have not tried to do anything like that. And yes, while I think children today, young people today, have a lot to contend with, there's a lot of pressure, and things are sort of moving at such a fast pace that there is no need. I feel you need to slow that down, and so, but in order to keep abreast of the rest of the world, they also are kind of pushed into using short forms and all of that, and that also requires a certain kind of literacy. Not I don't find it easy to do that, whereas young people are, little ones, 5-6 year olds, are able to do it. So it's a whole different approach. Having said that, I'll just share one little thought that with you, that something that crosses my mind. I retired from the Hindu business line a few years ago, and my drive to work used to be from my home to the Hindu office along the beach. Okay. So, and every time during Ganesh Chaturthi, when the time came for immersion of the idols, all these vehicles, these lorries would come from the opposite directions, because I used to have to go to work a little late in the day. So, all these lorries carrying huge statues of Ganesha, a very favorite god as far as I'm concerned, but these horrendously huge, brightly, garishly painted and accompanied by mostly by actually only young men looking very fierce and shouting fierce slogans and all of that. Every time they passed me by, I would think, if only these kids, I bet these kids don't read. If only they would read, they'll be sitting quietly reading, or they'll lead calmer lives probably. They wouldn't need to get into such a frenzy, So I feel all, in a sense, while social media, getting on different platforms is the need of the hour, and it is a good thing. There are many, many positive elements to it. There are so many ways in which social media can be used to reach young people who have never been reached, reaching the unreached. It's a wonderful tool. There's a flip side to that as well. And because it is leaving you no time to think, to reflect, to just be quiet and still inside, And so that's why I feel young people get easily misled by somebody who speaks well, or someone with a loud voice, or someone with a certain kind of a personality, or somebody who's just able to whip you up into a frenzy. That's how they get. I mean, I don't know. I could be completely wrong. I may be completely biased. I don't know. But these are some thoughts that I have regarding the current communication scenario.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Sandhya and Joya, for being with us today. Firstly, we learned a lot about how to imagine, to live in today's world. Firstly, that, and second, also about the how do you collect stories from oral traditions. I think this research and how to convert it into a story is a big takeaway for me, at least. These stories in this book and the way you have communicated to us teach us about water in such a way that this is going to stay with us for a very long time, which is not being judgmental, but just giving germ of an idea. That is what this book and all your communication about it today, it leads to that. Thank you so much, Sandhya and Joya, once again. We thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All of you for being so patient and such wonderful listeners. Just one small thought, with talking about water and water stories and Tiddalik the frog, I am reminded of when I was a child and we used to be given little projects to do. And one of the things that all of us have gone through is this life cycle of a frog, from being a egg to tadpole to frog and all that. And I remember every time it rained, there would be puddles, and then they'll find tadpoles swimming around where I lived in Durgapur near Calcutta. And we would collect those in big Horlicks jars and watch them grow into frogs and jump out, disappear one day, And we actually did those kind of lessons. I thought, okay, Tiddalik the frog, and connects to what we were doing. So there's actually so many connections that you can make, even with the stories that seem fantastical or mythological or just flights of imagination. There are always connections you can make with water, and these are ways in which it can be the importance or the necessities or the beauty of water can be communicated.
Yeah.
So thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll hand over to Mansi for next announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Alka. Thank you so much for bringing out this session. I know it takes a lot of effort to organize a session on your own. So thank you so much for taking us through the Friday.Waters book reading session for today. And then thanks, Sandhya, for this wonderful articulation and also at least helping us be like a child for an hour and remember all those grandmother stories, grandparent stories. And definitely a big thanks to young Zoya, very promising and I will say emerging artist, entrepreneur, and thinker, most of all, importantly. So thank you so much. Let me just take the honor to announce all of you about the forthcoming sessions. We are very proud to share that we are actually inching towards 100 sessions of water conversations towards water conservation. That's again the very idea which Sandhya ji was also talking about, that it is important to listen and see how water has been expressed in different ways. So we are not far from reaching 100 sessions. In December, we reach 100 sessions. So next Friday, we have an interesting session on Thesis Club, and we have a student from IIT Kharagpur who is going to talk about the case of Adi Ganga and really bring out the issue of, again, pollution. And Shreyasi Bhattacharya is our student of guest speaker from IIT Kharagpur. And next Wednesday, which is our signature series, usually having our group meetings or group talks, but because we are inching toward 100, we have 2 next Wednesdays as keynote speeches. So next Wednesday is our 98th session, and we are honored to have NIUA head, Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, to talk about approach towards net zero. So this is announcement for next week, and I think next week we are going to announce for the week after. So thank you for all of the participants who were really patiently listening to Sandhya ji and Joya and Alka, and also joining us at W4W Foundation Water Conversation. We look forward to having you next Friday and the Fridays to come, and of course Wednesday, and we have Monday also very interesting session where we only discuss about water and women. And those sessions are a bit of, one-to-one thing, but it is open also for people. So do take care of yourself, and we see each other soon. Please take care. Bye.